Okay, so let's get into the latest. You were at opening night last night, talking to the Eagles players. What were some of your biggest takeaways as they get closer and closer to this, the biggest game of the year?
Having covered past Super Bowls, one of the things I look at with the Eagles in particular is how are these guys handling the circus that is opening night, and throughout the week I watch how do they handle all that is right being at a Super Bowl, and I think I was pleased with what I saw so far, especially out of some of the young guys. I specifically was looking at the two rookies in the defense, in the defensive backfield, and Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. Those guys looked like they were pretty locked in and having fun with everything last night. And I talked to a couple of them too. They're just looking forward to the week that is here and getting out here and playing the game. So I like where they're at. I think the team's ready to go, and I think they're going to have a good shot to win on Sunday.
And of course, we're taping this on Tuesday, so there's not really much that we know right now. But have you heard anything about Brandon Graham's status or where he's at in his recovery? They opened up the window last week. What's his status look like as we get to Sunday?
I was with a bunch of people talking to Brandon last night, and of course, he's going to be asked that every day leading up to the game. Here's what I would say about Brandon Graham, having covered him for a long time in Philadelphia and being able to read his body language and what he says, and what I would say about Brandon Graham, if I had to guess, he will play in some way on Sunday. I think he will play. Now, is that just limited packages, third and long? He's just in there to rush, Patrick Mahomes on in passing downs, maybe. But based on what he's been saying, he didn't think he had. He was hearing that he didn't have a chance to be back by the Super Bowl. But anybody who knows Brandon Graham, he's not going to just accept that as being the case. So he was working along all the way through rehab with this in mind of being able to potentially get back out here. And he got out there. He tested it back in Philadelphia last week pretty hard before he left. He's going to test it harder throughout the week. He did acknowledge that to us last night. And I expect that, like I said, I think barring any kind of setback in testing it each day in practice, I think he'll be out there in some way, shape, or form. And that will give this team an emotional lift, having him back out there on the field. I was talking to guys last night. How much did it help having him back on the practice field? And they were all saying that it's an emotional lift having him out there, and it does get contagious, his energy.
Sticking with the defensive side of the ball, of course, 2 years ago, the Eagles had an historical defense, leading the league in sacks, breaking records, but they come into that game and they let up 38 points. What do you see as the biggest differences between this defense and that one 2 years ago against, the 2024-25 Chiefs?
Yeah, that's really one of the biggest reasons why I think they have a chance to win this game, a good chance to win this game. Of course, there are reasons on offense, but I really like this defense, the way they play together. They're very unselfish. They communicate well. They seem to read each other well. They know where to be and when. And I think it took them a little bit to get used to Vic Fangio's defense to be able to do that. But now they're there and they're playing at a very high level. You referenced 2 years ago. The players don't bring it up much, but obviously that team came into the game with 70 sacks and wasn't able to get one. And of course, both teams were slipping and sliding on what was a very bad surface. They both acknowledged that after the game, both teams. So that limited what the Eagles were able to do on the edges, especially. Hassan Reddick couldn't get there. They just couldn't plant that foot and get going towards Mahomes. This time on the turf, and I was on it last night, there will be no slipping. There will be plenty of opportunities for these guys to get there. But this defense is different. They aren't built to get 70 sacks in a season. They have gotten quite a few sacks in this postseason and leading up towards the end of the season as well. And I think that's just coming from more guys getting more familiar in this defense. Jalen Carter is the guy who starts it all up front. He can wreck an offense, and he deserves a lot of attention. And when he gets it, it opens up other guys, especially Josh or Nolan Smith this postseason, who's been leading the team in sacks in the playoffs. He's been able to get off the edge on one-on-one battles and be able to get there. So I think it's going to be an interesting matchup to watch on that defensive line and how they do it. But I love this defense. I think that they are built to be able to keep in my mind, I think they got to keep the Chiefs at 24 or less. And if they do that, I think the Eagles will win this game.
And of course, on the offensive side of the ball, the all the talk is Saquon Barkley, Saquon Barkley. you know, it, of course, it's you're going to need a somewhat of a big rush game from him to be able to really seal this for the team, at least on the offensive side of the ball. What's it going to take for Jalen Hurts to be able to lead this team to a win? Of course, I'll keep bringing it up. 2 years ago, 300 passing yards, a passing touchdown, but then 70 rushing yards and three rushing touchdowns. Which part of his game do you think is going to be more valuable in this Super Bowl? His pass game or what he can do on the ground running the ball?
I think he will have to make some big pass plays occasionally. But in that game, as you referenced, he had to do the rushing. None of the running backs were able to really do much. I don't expect that to be the case this time. This offensive line creates any kind of little hole for Saquon. He turns it into positive yardage. And in second half of games, after this offensive line has continued to wear guys down, they become home runs. And I think that that's kind of what they're going to try to do again here in this game. But that means that occasionally Jalen will have to make the big throws. And a lot of people have forgotten, as you pointed out, he had a huge game throwing the ball 2 years ago. And so he's done it on this stage, in this, in that environment. And there's no reason to believe he can't do it again. But, that also being the case, I think what makes Saquon effective and what helps make Jalen effective with his legs is each other. The threat that Saquon brings helps Jalen, and the fact that Jalen can run the ball helps Saquon. As we've seen when Jalen was out earlier this year after the concussion he got against the Commanders, it seemed like, look, Saquon still got his yards, but it wasn't quite the same as when Jalen was in the game. So I expect that to be a big thing that the Chiefs are going to have to deal with. Obviously, the threat both of them pose with their legs. And then Jalen, I think, will have to make some big throws occasionally in this game.
Now, of course, I have to ask about, their big opponent, the Chiefs. What from on both sides of the ball, where do you think the Chiefs kind of have that edge or the advantage against the Eagles, on offense and defense?
Well, obviously, one of the biggest matchups to watch is going to be how the Eagles try to defend Travis Kelce. The guy's a Hall of Famer for a reason, and he's a big-bodied tight end, as everybody knows. One of the former Eagles, who's with the team in a support capacity, Brent Selleck, spent all last week running routes against these defenders, so that they got an idea of a bigger tight end. You saw Zach Ertz last week for the Commanders have a huge game against this team. 11 catches, over 100 yards. The Eagles don't want Travis Kelce to do that. So I'm going to be curious to watch how Vic Fangio sets up the coverage against a Travis Kelce. I expect two guys to be around him at all times. They don't want Kelce to beat him. Now, that being said, Patrick Mahomes is, one of the best quarterbacks, the best quarterback probably of this generation for sure. Always in a Super Bowl for a reason. You got to not let that guy beat you either, but he's got to have somebody to throw to. And I think if they can take Travis Kelce out of the mix for the most part, he does have weapons on the outside, but these corners have done so good. You have Slay out there. You have Quinyon Mitchell, the rookie, who has shut down a lot of good receivers this year. I just think that they're going to be able to do that. But the biggest thing too is don't let Mahomes break contain. So these guys, when they get on the outside and they do rush, they've got to hold their lanes and not get too tempted to try to cut in and go get him, because if he escapes out the other side, those can be back-breaking third downs that move the chains, and we've seen him do it many times. So I think it's going to be a fascinating chess match to watch what the Eagles do with some of the top players on that Chiefs offense.
And you brought it up earlier. You don't think the Eagles can let up, more than 24 points to the Chiefs if they want to have a chance to win this game. The last question I have for you is, what is your score prediction for Super Bowl 59?
Yeah, that's a good one. I haven't really thought about the score yet. I think the Eagles win this game. I do. I just like this defense and the weapons they have on offense. And the experience of being there 2 years ago is big. I think these guys know what to expect this week. I saw Jalen Hurts 2 years ago start getting irritated later in the week when he had to keep getting in front of the media every day. He knows that's going to be expected this time. Nick Sirianni was just enamored with the whole thing, and I think like a kid, just giddy to be there and enjoyed that. He is so businesslike this week. Just last night I saw it. He was more businesslike and less emotional. So I see this team being much more prepared for all of that. As a result, I do like the Eagles to win this game. I think they're going to win this one. I'm going to go with a 30. I'll go with 30-23.